Everyone's got an opinion on the best rep range for muscle growth, but what if I told you the science has already tested this and most lifters are completely misapplying it? The real answer when taking an individual evidence-based approach, if you're natural, might completely flip how you train. I'm Faz from Fazlift. I've been coaching natural lifters for over a decade, and today I'm breaking down the exact rep range that builds the most muscle, what the science says, where people screw it up, and why your rep range needs to evolve as you do. And make sure you stick around for point 3, because most lifters ignore this, and it's the reason they burn out, stall, or get injured after their first few years of progress. By the end, you'll know what the real hypertrophy zone is, why both high reps and low reps have serious drawbacks, and most importantly, how to build a custom rep system that fits your joints, age, and your training experience. Now, without further ado, let's get straight into it. So science says that there is a wide effective range. In 2017, Cites Schoenfeld and colleagues published a paper where they analyzed 21 studies and concluded that muscle hypertrophy can occur across a wide rep range, from as low as 5 reps to as high as 30 reps per set, as long as the sets are taken close to or near failure. The finding was echoed by Morton in 2016. In that study, one group trained with 8 to 12 reps, another with 20 to 25 reps. The result was that both groups had the same increase in muscle thickness and fiber size after 12 weeks, again, as long as the proximity to failure was equivalent. So the effective range isn't just the 8 to 12 that is commonly talked about. It's really more like 5 to 30, assuming that proximity to failure is consistent. However, this was hugely misinterpreted by all your favorite influencers at the time, who immediately jumped onto the bandwagon to tell you that you should unequivocally do reps between 5 to 30. But here's the nuance that we're going to talk about today. Just because all of those reps work physiologically doesn't mean they all work practically for all exercises, for all people, under the same circumstances. So let's break that down today. We're going to start by talking about the drawbacks of high rep sets. So that is, reps are between 20 to 30, which are in that effective range. Training with very high repetitions can build muscle, but it also comes with practical drawbacks that lifters should consider. First one is cardiovascular fatigue and burn. High rep sets tend to cause a lot of cardiovascular and metabolic fatigue. Lifters often experience a pounding heart and strong lactic acid burn in the muscles before the set even reaches failure. Scientific comparisons show that high rep protocols lead to higher lactate buildup and higher rates of perceived exertion than moderate rep training. In a 2020 study by Molina, it was shown that participants felt greater levels of RPE during high rep sets. So just to break that down, if we do acknowledge that the pain is what drives some people to quit, then if we are using sets which actually increase that level of pain where we don't need to, we may be artificially putting a cap on our intensity. Our failure in high rep sets may not actually reflect real muscle failure or even close. In fact, Schoenfeld's review notes show that people find light load, high rep training more uncomfortable, reporting more overall discomfort and higher effort RPE compared to training with moderate or heavy loads. His exact words from that study: repetition continuum is not necessarily valid for hypertrophy. Training with low loads tends to produce more discomfort, displeasure, and a higher rating of perceived exertion than training with moderate to high loads. Therefore, from a practical standpoint, training with moderate loads is likely to be more enjoyable, which may also impact long-term adherence. This means that super high reps can be harder to endure. The limiting factor might be how much it burns you out or tires you out, or just simply the pain of the set, rather than how much you're directly fatiguing the target muscle. And let's not forget about form breakdown. With very high rep sets, especially on compound lifts, maintaining perfect form throughout the long set becomes challenging as you gasp for air, your muscles burn, your technique can start to deteriorate. Experts have pointed out that chasing metabolic fatigue with high rep squats or deadlifts is, quote unquote, brutally hard. Fatigue accumulates and it increases the risk of form breakdown, putting you in a compromised position that could raise injury risk. In other words, what they're saying is a classic set of 20 rep squats might turn sloppy towards the end as your body struggles to keep stable under that deep fatigue. For big lifts, many lifters find that super high reps are limited by cardio and technique more than muscle stimulation. Now, that is somewhat improved the better shape you're in, but it still will apply to anybody of a 20 to 30 rep set of squats or deadlifts. So while 25 rep sets of squats can work, they're often limited by pain tolerance, not muscle tension, and if your form collapses, your stimulus is going to get sloppy. That's why I personally reserve high rep squats only for isolation lifts, where breakdown isn't dangerous or disruptive. I mean, just think about it in practical terms. A higher rep set of side raises with a cable is not going to impact your cardiovascular system massively. It's also not really going to lead to a lot of form breakdown, and you can lighten the load, which means that your joints may have a far easier time in accepting a set to or close to failure. So what I'm saying is that this can be advantageous for isolation lifts. You can save on joint stress by reducing load and going to or close to failure. This also allows you to better control the weight and often allows for a better mind-muscle connection with those smaller exercises where mind-muscle connection and getting the squeeze can really help. Next, let's talk about low reps, anything below 5. So while they're great for strength, they come with 3 hypertrophy specific problems. First of all, joint wear and tear. In the same 2017 meta-analysis by Schoenfeld, the researchers noted that joint stress increases disproportionately as load goes up, even if hypertrophy doesn't. That is now the now classic study, which compared equal volumes of either 7 sets of 3 or 3 sets of 7. Now, while results showed similar increases in bicep brachii muscle thickness between those conditions, participants in the powerlifting type group displayed signs of overtraining and joint-related issues at the study's end, whereas no such symptoms were observed in the bodybuilding type group. The findings suggest that although hypertrophy can be achieved using either heavy or moderate loads on a work-matched basis, the heavy load protocols may not be sustainable for maximizing muscle growth due to negative consequences of the higher training volumes. That's especially problematic in older or previously injured lifters. There was a 2007 trial by Messier. He showed that high intensity strength training did not improve joint pain outcomes compared to lower load training for older lifters. In fact, heavy lifted tended to increase risk of flare-ups. So what we're saying there is this may be problematic, especially for the older or previously injured lifters. If you're a young 20-something, you may not encounter these problems and you may love low reps and you may think that's the way forward. But just understand that there is some nuance and there will be one day when you are older and you need to account for this kind of thing. So it's best not to make absolute statements just because you're inexperienced. So the assertion, which has become popular recently, that low rep protocols increase tendon strengthening over more moderate loads, is also a misunderstanding of the research that mainly comes from one guy who's made a career out of misunderstanding the research. My personal feeling is that for most people, moderate load training is sufficient to provide functionality for their lives. Now, the second point around low rep training, poor muscle targeting. So when you go too heavy, the body finds any way to move the weight using momentum, joint shifts, and secondary muscles. This means you're completing the lift, but not stimulating the target tissue. Now, the RDL is a great example of an exercise where I found huge variance in relative performance amongst trainees, mostly because while some are happy to shift the weight onto the lower back, others stop when hamstrings give out. We don't necessarily want the RDL to become a back dominant movement when we're trying to build hamstrings. We also don't want the bench to build shoulders and triceps. It's great for the ego, but it's not good for hypertrophy. What ends up happening is the strong muscles get stronger, the weaker muscles get weaker, and eventually something gives out. So the second point is there, lower rep sets may not be the absolute best for bodybuilding as a whole. And again, it's one of those things where if you're very underdeveloped and you're very weak and training on machines, you may well be okay with low rep sets because that is a paradigm we're starting to see mostly from the TikTok bros. So I've just explained how that is becoming so popular. It makes sense within that context. However, I would argue it's still not the best for hypertrophy, but it may be good for those beginners establishing a base of muscle, potentially, but probably not. Anyway, third point against low reps is central fatigue. Heavier sets come with more neural stress, longer recovery, and reduced total training volume. It's not ideal for naturals who aren't recovering with pharmaceutical assistance. So you will notice that a lot of the guys who really favor this whole 4 to 8 low rep sets with very, very stable movements do tend to do very low volumes. That is because there is a lot of fatigue which is generated from those sets. So as a result, you can probably only get away with 1 or 2 sets per body part, maybe a couple of times a week. So that has a practical implication for the amount of volume you can do. If you're generating so much central fatigue from every one set you're doing, you're going to limit your overall volume, and that can limit your overall growth. Again, not a bad thing for beginners. It's workable, but I would argue anything is workable for beginners. So low reps are useful, but only if your form is dialed in and your joints can handle it. Just remember, if you are currently progressing on a very low volume of very low reps, your body may change, and that's really what this video is about. But anyway, in terms of an actual practical implementation, that's why the Jacked Intellectual program on BOOSTCAMP uses a movement-specific rep strategy. Compounds are trained in a more moderate to low rep range, enough low to drive tension, not so much that it wrecks your joints, and isolations are trained in a moderate to higher rep range where metabolic stress becomes more of a weapon. You are not forced into a one-size-fits-all range. You adapt your lift based on your structure, your recovery bandwidth, and where you are in the program. You can grab the program now on BOOSTCAMP. It's designed for natural lifters who actually care about execution. Use my code Fazlifts for a free 2-week premium trial. Now for the final part you've all been waiting for. Your rep range should evolve. This is what most lifters never figure out because people are too busy trying to be in camps and trying to be right. Fact of the matter is, I've trained for 26 years. My favorite rep range has evolved massively over those years, and so will yours. Your optimal rep range isn't fixed. It evolves with your age, your joint health, your training age, which is different to your age, your injury history, your pain tolerance, and your movement efficiency. Every lifter is unique, and all these factors can influence which rep range feels best for you right now. The good news is that because hypertrophy is possible across a wide rep spectrum, you can tailor your training to your needs while still gaining muscle. As we age, our joints and recovery capabilities change. Research suggests that older individuals can stimulate hypertrophy just as effectively with lighter loads as they can with heavy loads. In fact, a meta-analysis on seniors found they built muscle with both high and low loads, but the heavy load training led to less growth in the fast twitch fibers because joint pain or orthopedic issues made it harder for them to push maximally with heavy weights. Thus, an older lifter or somebody with osteoarthritis might choose a slightly higher rep range, let's say maybe 10 to 20, to reduce joint strain rather than grinding out heavy triples. They'll still gain muscle since effort is the key driver, and they'll likely find it more comfortable on their joints. Programs for older adults often recommend moderate intensities, around say 70 to 85% of 1 rep max. Heavy enough to build strength and muscle, but not so heavy that form or joints give out. This allows older lifters to train safely and consistently, which is crucial for long-term progress. And the next thing is injury history and joint issues. If you have a past injury or a troublesome joint, you can adjust your rep range to work around it. For example, someone with a bad shoulder might avoid low rep bench presses and instead do sets of 10 to 15 with a manageable weight, still challenging the muscle but with less shearing force on the joint. The principle of effective reps applies. As long as you push near failure, those last challenging reps in any range will stimulate growth. It's often smart to accumulate that stimulus with moderate weights if heavy weights aggravate your joints. Some studies on painful joints show that lighter or moderate resistance training can improve strength and function without worsening pain. So listening to your body and staying in a joint-friendly rep range, even if that means high reps with lighter weights, can keep you progressing while rehabbing or preventing injuries. And I know this better than anyone. I was lifting as a powerlifter since I was 18. My training is so incredibly different now. The commonalities are I still work hard, I still try and progress, but the modality is completely different. If I had just been committed to one way of lifting since day one, I would not be in the gym right now. And that's the bottom line. Therefore, when I hear arguments about the optimum rep range, like this rep range is the best, this rep range is the best, or what's the best rep range, Faz? You just think it's the wrong question. What is the best rep range for you right now? I've given you a lot to think about in this video about your own training and how to really evaluate your own reps. However, it's going to be up to you to go away, experiment and see, well, what allows you to train hard while still progressing without pain. And the next thing is training age, so your experience level. Newer lifters might thrive in a moderate rep range initially, which allows them to practice form and get sufficient volume without excessive joint stress. As they build a base, they can experiment with low reps for strength or high reps for endurance as needed. Experienced lifters, those with higher training age, often have the confidence and skill to be able to use a variety of rep ranges, both low and high. However, seasoned lifters don't have to punish their bodies with all heavy lifting all the time to keep growing. They can mix in moderate and high rep work to spare their joints while still gaining size. Many advanced lifters discover that after years of heavy pounding, they tolerate and enjoy a slightly higher rep range for accessory work or even main lifts at times. I'm one of them. I generally don't do reps lower than 10 right now. I am happy to trade off that little bit of joint stress for a little bit more cardiovascular demand or burn and pain, if that means I can still train heavy in the gym and make some gains. Like in most of my recommendations, I am fairly moderate. I'm neither a high volume guy or a low volume guy. Equally speaking, I am neither a high rep guy or a low rep guy. It's quite funny actually, most of the low volume advocates consider me a high volume guy. Most of the high volume advocates consider me a low volume guy. That is the consequence of being in the middle. So the bottom line is the best lifters evolve. They adjust their rep range to fit their body, their training today, not the one they had 10 years ago, and especially not what they heard on Instagram or YouTube. They figure it out for themselves because they understand they are an individual, they are unique, and this is a journey. So to sum it up, the optimal rep range for hypertrophy is not a fixed number. It's a range of ranges. About 5 to 30 reps per set can all build muscle. So you can choose your rep targets that suit your body and your goals. Use high reps when you want to change your pace, when you need to reduce joint load, but be ready for that burn. Use low reps when building strength, but watch your joints and your form, and use moderate reps as the backbone of your training for a blend of stimulus and sustainability. Pay attention to your age, your injury history and recovery. A natural lifter in their 20s might very well handle 5 rep sets with ease, while a 50-year-old lifter with cranky knees might grow better with 12 to 20 rep sets. The science says you have options. So find the rep ranges that allow you to train hard, train safely, and stick with it long term, and you'll maximize hypertrophy as a natural lifter. And finally, if you're still here and you want to know why most lifters fail, even when they get the rep range right, go watch this next. Why 97% of lifters fail to reach their natural limit. It covers the deeper issue of stimulus, recovery, and mindset. Hit that video now, and I'll see you there.